Hey there, welcome to Flute Q&A number 6 with me, Jane Kavanagh. So I'm coming to you from Sydney, which is in lockdown because of COVID. So I don't really have anywhere to go out to, so I thought I'd put on my going out shirt to be here for you today. There were so many good questions. So I put a call out, I sent an email out to people asking if they have flute questions, and that's you. I got so many good questions. Originally, I was going to choose the best few and do a video on it, a Q&A video on it for you, and just choose the best questions that would help the most people. But I couldn't do it. There are so many good questions. I got about 40 or so at the moment anyway. Every single one of them was amazing. So if you asked a question, good on you for asking such smart and interesting questions, and they will all help a lot of people. So thank you for being so thoughtful, like in an intelligent way of asking your questions. I can't remember how I started that sentence, but thanks anyway. So what I'm going to do, instead of just doing this one Q&A, I'm going to do a series of them because I want to actually get through all of the questions. So to find out when your question is answered, I'll send an email as part of my regular weekly email that I send out to you. And in that email, I'll say who's asked the questions for today and the questions they've answered. So if you're watching this on YouTube and you haven't signed up for my weekly email, I'd suggest you do if you want to find out when your question is answered. You can go to www.flute.school. I love my URL, by the way. I love my domain name, the .school. So cool. It's not a .com. So go to www.flute.school. Sign up for anything on that website, like the free mini course, for example, to improve your tone instantly. And you'll go onto my email list and you'll find out when your question is answered. Or if you're a YouTube fan, just keep watching the videos on YouTube and you'll eventually find out when your question is answered. Okay, so we've got 6 questions today from Vivian, Cherie, Rachael, Sean, Bonnie, and Bette. All excellent questions. Now, this is a little bit different to the videos that I normally record for you. Normally those videos they'll sort of, each one will take me about an hour to plan, to structure, so that I teach you in the best way, in the most clearest way, with certain steps. And I'll edit the videos. When I go off on a ramble or my brain sort of has a mini meltdown and I have to think about something for like 10 seconds, I'll edit that out. So you see the nice, smooth, well thought out Jane. In the Q&As, however, I don't edit it out. So just like that. Yeah, that's not getting edited out. So you get to see all of my brain farts. You get to see all of my word stumbles. So if that's your thing, you're welcome. If it's not, sorry. All right, let's get going. Vivian asks, how can I get a good tone when playing notes in the middle octave? It's a really good question, Vivian. That is the reason why I created the free mini course called How to Instantly Improve Your Tone, which I mentioned a moment ago. And the reason I created that is because your question is basically the number one question that all flute players have, and it's how to get a better tone on the flute. For you, it's specifically the middle octave. So I am guessing that your low notes and your high notes you're pretty happy with. Either that, or you're just actually starting with the middle octave and you haven't even ventured into the higher octave and the lower octave yet. Either way, yes, there is a way to get a better tone. And you're not alone in wondering how you do get a better tone. So like I said, it's the number one thing that people want to improve in their flute playing. And I just get that from the questions that I get asked. There's a lot of information, a lot of questions about tone. So I've got a program called the Flute Academy. The new improved version of the Flute Academy is opening for enrollments on the 1st of August this year, which is 2021, just in case you're watching this in the future. Hope the future's good wherever you're watching this from, whichever year you're watching this from. Hope you're over coronavirus by then. the new improved version of the Flute Academy contains in it an exercise called the magic tone exercise. And this is where I take people, it's over a week, this exercise in the academy. So I think it's over 7 days, 6 or 7 days. And step by step, I teach you how to tune your ears, attune, I don't know if that's a real word, your embouchure into being sensitive enough. So your hearing sensitive enough and your embouchure sensitive enough to pick up micro improvements in your tone. And I show you how to get these micro improvements. And then we build on that through this exercise, the magic tone exercise, and you come out the other side with a better tone, but also understanding how to improve your tone every time you practice. And then you incrementally build on that good tone. And then week by week, you end up with quite a resonant and a much stronger sound than you had before. So basically that's how you do it. You tune your ears into recognizing tiny, tiny, tiny changes to your sound, which then teaches your embouchure the movements to make because you're using your ears to guide your embouchure, and then you're sticking with it through that note. So I'll give you an example. I'll do it on an E because this is in the middle octave, like where you're wanting to improve. So the idea is this is just the very, 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 very tip of the iceberg with this magic tone exercise. But the idea is to notice improvements in the sound as you go through the note. Now there's a high probability that you just heard me play that note and you're like, oh, what are you doing? And I couldn't hear any difference. It's because you're not tuned in yet. I haven't taught you how to fine tune your ears into hearing what to listen for. So that's kind of the high level concept of improving your tone. And then if I was to give like a 10-second response into how do you improve your tone, I'd say find a tone exercise, because there's heaps out there. Find a tone exercise like the magic tone exercise that works for you. Find a tone exercise that you notice when you play it, every single time that you play it, you notice your tone get better. That's what you want in a tone exercise. So, you can Google tone exercise flute. You can come along on the 1st of October and join me in the Flute Academy and see the magic tone exercise, or you can get a recommendation from a friend, from a flute teacher. But as long as you notice that the tone exercise that you choose is actually making a difference to the tone of your flute playing, then you're onto a winner. Okay, the next question comes from Cherie. Hi, Cherie. How do professionals taper note endings? I've read that a good taper is to push the jaw forward, aim the air higher, to let it whisper away. However, I think there is more magic in it. That is such an interesting question, Cherie, because I have heard and have been taught in the past exactly what you learn about pushing your jaw forward. However, I have come to believe and learn and know that that is not the right way to taper a note. When you play the flute, you really do not want your jaw moving forward and back. Our jaw as a human is not designed to move like that. It does move like that. So, for example, if you have a certain expression on your face or you pout, it's like a sulky pout, like your jaw's going to go forward. So it can move like that. But you don't want to be doing something like playing the flute that is very repetitive, repetitive in a good way. You don't want to be doing something that is repetitive, for example, typing, unrelated to the jaw, of course, and deliberately moving your jaw in that way, because you will end up hurting your jaw and the muscles around your jaw, and it's not something that you want to incorporate into your flute playing. Plus, on top of that, it's not the most effective way to taper a note. So that's kind of lucky. So there is a better way. And it is such a specific way and a much better way that I have that topic exactly, how to taper ends of notes, which means how to taper ends of phrases. as a specific topic in December this year. I've got it scheduled for December of the Flute Academy. So if you're wondering what the Flute Academy is, it's month by month we have a new topic. I don't have my list here of what's scheduled, but off the top of my head, I've scheduled how to double tongue as one of the months. So we're October, November, December for the rest of this year. How to double tongue, how to memorize pieces, how to memorize scales, and how to taper notes. That's for the first few months anyway. They're the topics. And in the academy, just as an aside, if you have signed up to the academy in the past, and it's the 45-day program, that is now called the 45-day flute transformation, because it's exactly what that 45-day course does for you. That's included in the new expanded version of the Flute Academy. So, excuse me, Cherie, if you sign up for the Flute Academy, any time, but what you will expect in December is the exercise and a very detailed workshop into how to taper flute, how to taper notes on the flute, which means, obviously how to taper phrases as well. But in a nutshell, the way to play softer and keep it clear on the flute, which is what is involved in tapering a note, is getting this hole in your mouth, your embouchure hole, smaller for the ends of the phrases. You don't want your airstream to slow down because that will make you flat. So it's really a balance between getting the hole in your mouth smaller, but keeping the air speed the same. So you will be blowing softer because the hole is smaller. And just like a garden hose, if you have a smaller hole and you want the air to go or the water to go the same speed and the same distance, if we're talking about a garden hose, you will have less water coming through or less air going through your embouchure hole. So you will blow softer, but you don't want to blow so soft that the airspeed slows down. So it's a balance between slowing your blowing and I'm trying to get this clear. Slowing your blowing and getting a smaller hole in your mouth so that it equals the same airspeed. And on top of that, you've got to get your embouchure to get used to being able to play very softly with a small hole. Because if you try that now, your sound will go fluffy. And that's probably the problem that you're having, is that you're trying to taper and you're probably naturally getting a smaller hole by, trying to taper it, but your sound goes fluffy or your sound disappears. That's because you haven't learnt yet how to actually play with a smaller hole. It's a step-by-step process, and that's what that workshop is going to be. I haven't recorded it yet, so I haven't gone through the actual steps. I haven't planned out the actual steps. Like, I teach people this all the time, but then to plan one of the workshops in the new Flute Academy, I will actually sit down and go, okay, so what do I teach my student, and how do I get it into a step-by-step process to teach someone like you? So that's what I'm going to do before December, obviously, because that's when it comes out, and break down that process for you. So what I just told you then is exactly what you need to do. The how is going to be in the Flute Academy in December. So, hope to see you there. But at least that gives you an overview of what to try and do yourself, and the mechanics of what are going on. So, just as an example, to taper a note, it would sound like this. I don't know whether you could hear it right to the end. Hopefully that didn't go flat. So I was, the ideal is that the pitch stays the same. So balancing the speed of your airstream with the size of your hole. So what was happening then was the hole in my mouth was getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, but the airstream was compensating for that by backing off a little bit, but not too much. Otherwise it would have gone flat or flatter than it did. I think it probably did go a little bit flat, but the more you practice that, the more you get used to keeping the pitch up and balancing that airstream and size of hole. Actually, I'll give you an example of it actually going flat. So this one, I'm not going to balance it. I'm going to get a smaller hole and you'll hear it go flat. Did you hear that the pitch dipped down on that one? So that's what you need to compensate for. Okay, the next question comes from Rachael. Rachael, I love the spelling of your name because I had a friend, actually a flute player friend, when I was a kid called Rachael with your spelling, and I have never met or heard of anyone since that has your spelling. So cool. I'm glad that your spelling is still out there. Rachael says, hello, hi. Do you know of some simple sheet music for the entertainer? Well, I am glad you asked. Yes, I do, and I'm putting it in the comments below for you. On top of that, I have already recorded a video before you asked this question on how to play the entertainer. No, I am not kidding. And it's scheduled. I've put it onto my list of weekly videos. It's scheduled for only a few weeks from now. I think it's like about 3 weeks away, maybe 4. So look out for it. So I play it through for you, and you can print out the sheet music in the link that I've put here. Plus, I give you like a teaching tip on how to play it, how to play it better, like one thing that you can concentrate to make it sound better. So look out for that, Rachael. Okay, Sean asks, I've been using plastic fillings in my G hole. Should I take it out eventually? Where are my plugs? They're in my flute case, which is over there. Okay, I'm going to be super fast and I'm going to get my flute plugs so I can show you. Okay, don't go anywhere. I'm still here. Okay, you can tell I live in a small apartment because I just went to the other end of my apartment. So what Sean is talking about is if you have an open-holed flute which has 5 holes in the keys and you can't cover the holes properly, which means your notes don't work properly, so I'm just going to crack one of the holes. I'm going to crack, say, this one, and lots of things won't work. There you go. That was from just having this hole here cracked open. And what I played was this. Something like that, and you could hear that it didn't work. So Sean has plugged up the G hole, which is this one. So this is a common one to not be able to close properly. Some flutes have an inline G, it's called. So you can see on my flute and most flutes, see these 2 keys here? See how they offset to the rest of this row of keys? The reason for that is because at some point in the flute making history, they realized that it's much easier to cover that hole if that G key is offset, it's called, rather than in line with everything else. If you have an inline G, I find it quite hard to cover that hole. Some people don't have a problem with covering that hole on an inline G, but everyone has different length fingers, shaped hands, so it's different for everyone. There's no sort of right or wrong with whether you should have an inline or an offset G. So these are the plugs that Sean is talking about, and he's got one plugged up. Mine's cork, but you can get them made out of plastic as well. So he's got this one plugged up like that. And what was his question? Should I take it out? Should I take it out eventually? Oh, I thought my camera stopped recording. Hi, still here. His question is, should I take it out eventually? Sean, you don't have to. Totally not. Like I said, everyone's hands and fingers are different lengths, shapes. If you find it difficult to play without it, just leave it in. It's like, it doesn't matter. Like if you have something that makes it easier to play. For example, you can get things called thumb ports, which stick onto your flute and make this thumb more comfortable when you play. If it makes the flute more comfortable to play and it doesn't have a negative effect on any other part of your playing, then just totally stick with it. So same with this G hole plug. If you find it easy, keep it in. Having said that, if you want a challenge, you can take it out and really focus on getting your hand position to be ideal. Now, if you already have an ideal hand position where your fingers are nicely curved, your fingers hit in the middle of these keys, not sort of on the edge or hanging over, although that would be a bit hard to play. If you already have your fingers on the middle of these keys, then it sounds like you've probably got quite a good hand position already. As long as your hand's not sort of too low on the flute and struggling to reach for this G key, as long as your finger's sort of in the middle, it sounds like you have good hand position. And the reason good hand position is important because it gives you less tension in your hands, and it means that you can play notes faster, basically. If you have a good hand position, which is basically balanced and as little tension as possible, it means that your fingers are free to move quicker. There's a whole module in the 45-day flute transformation, which is part of the Flute Academy, a whole module on hand position, which leads onto the module called Faster Fingers. The reason that the module on hand position is before the Faster Fingers is because we set you up with a good hand position to free up your fingers to then actually do the faster finger exercises that come later. So Sean, it's kind of up to you. As long as you've got a good hand position, you can leave the plug in. I've just got to remember to take that plug out later, because otherwise I'll pick up my flute later and go, what's this thing in my flute? Because I'm not used to playing with them. Sean, I've got a great bit of advice for you. I almost forgot. When you put the plug in the hole, push it in so that you can feel the hole with your finger, and that will give you a sense of what it's going to be what it's going to feel like to play with the hole out, with the plug out. So it's going to give you a sense of what the hole feels like to your finger, and this will get you used to playing without plug. So that's my intermediate step for students, is I get them to push the plugs in so they know what the holes feel like. It's sort of like a tactile thing. So there you go. Hope that helps. Okay, the next question comes from Bonnie. How do I get a high F sharp to come out clear and pretty? It's a great question, Bonnie. Now, there's two answers to this. The first part of this answer, F sharp is a bit of a notoriously unstable note on the flute. By unstable, I mean this. If you don't have the right way of playing high notes and you go for this high F sharp, instead of coming out like this, it will come out like this and not high enough, or it will drop down like that. So it's notoriously unstable. So the first part of the answer is to make sure that you're playing high notes the right way. There is a whole method to getting your embouchure to do the right thing for high notes. And the 45-day transformation that I mentioned, which is in the Flute Academy, there's a section on how to play high notes. You've probably heard me talk about slightly pouting for high notes and absolutely not pulling back. So a lot of people go tight for playing high notes, but as you get up into the higher and especially unstable notes like F sharp, this pulling back like this, it doesn't work anymore. So it might get you, so you can see I'm pulling back, it might get you these high notes. That was F sharp. When you get to the more unstable notes like that F sharp and you're pulling back, basically your method of playing high notes, if you've been pulling back, crumbles. It doesn't work anymore. So what you really need to be learning is the slight pout, which is the real way of playing high notes. Step by step, I take you through that in that module I just mentioned, the high notes module, and you'll end up being able to control your high notes, including the unstable ones like F sharp. So And it's easy. Like, it becomes easy and you don't need to blow harder, and it works. So that's the first part of the answer, is learn the real way to play high notes. The second part of the answer is there's a little bit of a cheat fingering. But this is really only a cheat fingering. So instead of this, you play this. It's not a fingering that you can't use this to compensate for your not good high note technique. It's the sort of thing that once you do have good high note technique and you can get all these high notes, that if you're in a situation, let's say you're playing in a band or an orchestra, you have a solo and it involves a soft high F sharp, you're nervous, you've got extra pressure on you, and it has to come out at all costs. Like, you've got a lot of pressure on you. That's where this cheat fingering comes in, and it's nice. It makes that high F sharp slightly easier to play. It's actually only slightly easier though. It makes it more stable, but if you are pulling back when you're playing high notes, it's probably not going to help that much. And remember that it doesn't compensate for, or it doesn't overcome not great high note technique. So anyway, so that's a bit of a trick fingering for you that can help if you're, playing something exposed. But you don't make it your regular way of playing high F sharp, because it's just too... Let's say this, if you need to use that middle fingering F sharp as your regular way of playing F sharp, then it means there's something a bit off with your high note technique. Okay, the last question today comes from Bette. When you're done playing for a day, what do you recommend we do before putting the flute in its case? Great question, and a nice one to finish on as well. Bette, I did a video, and I've put a link below this video for you, about the pros and cons of keeping a flute out of its flute case. So there's more information for you in that, which you might find interesting. But what do I do before putting my flute in its case? Well, the number one thing is to clean the inside of the flute. And I don't mean clean as in get away dirt, I mean dry the inside of the flute. So you've probably got one of these as well, a cleaning rod. So a cleaning rod and a cloth, which is quite an absorbent gauze. I'll give you a crash course in cleaning your flute. It's really important to get the inside of your flute dry, because if you don't, it will start to stink. Basically, it's what happens. If you just played as much as I played just then, which is not much, it's probably not even wet inside. No. So I probably wouldn't even clean it if I just played that much. But chances are you're playing more than that. You can take the flute apart and clean it in 3 pieces, but I have this nice little express way of cleaning the flute, which I love doing. So I stick that in the end and then take off the foot joint and put it in the case, and then put it all the way through there. And sometimes, it didn't work. Sometimes I can get it to stay in my head joint, and it's super express. And then when you get up here, just give it a twizzle. I think I just made up that word. A twizzle, a twist, because you want to try and get the moisture from up here. Now, I have flute students, young ones, and they're like, no, there's still a bit of moisture and I can't get, and they spend 10 minutes trying to get that moisture out. It doesn't matter. As long as if you've got 99% of the moisture out, that's good. That's better than putting it away wet. So that's what I do. The other thing I do, or I don't actually do, but I'll show you. In my flute case, I have an anti-tarnish strip in my flute case. It stops your flute from tarnishing, basically. They apparently only last about 6 months, and then you have to replace them. It sort of sucks up the sucks up. I don't know if that's right. Absorbs the sulfur. I think it's the sulfur in the air that contributes to tarnishing a flute and making a flute go grey and black. So if your flute is in its case and there's an anti-tarnish strip in there, your flute won't tarnish, or not tarnish as much. I tend to leave my flute out, honestly, just like this, because I'm playing it nearly every day, and it's just nice. And while we're in lockdown, it's like I'm not going anywhere, so it just stays out. The downside is that it goes grey and tarnishes, but when I get my Flute service, they clean all that off, so it's all good. That's it. So have a great week, I think I would say, because I'm going to record another one of these Q&As for next week. So you get another one next week, and I'll gradually get through all your questions. Have a great week. See you next time.